They fired me in silence. No farewell party, no thank you email. Just a cold, corporate dismissal. They thought I'd disappear quietly into their rearview mirror. What they didn't know, I was the one approving every multi-million-dollar vendor invoice that kept their operation breathing. And that $80 million vendor they couldn't live without, I owned 51% of it. They wanted to cut me loose. I just cut their oxygen supply. My name is Darla Monroe, and for 12 years, I was the invisible engine that kept TheraPoint running. At 42, I'd spent my entire career making other people look good while they collected the accolades, but I was fine with that arrangement until they decided I was expendable. TheraPoint wasn't always the sleek Denver tech darling it pretends to be now. When I joined in the early days, we were 8 people crammed into a shared workspace that smelled like burnt coffee and desperation. The founders had vision but zero operational sense. They could pitch to investors all day. But when it came to actually making things work, that's where I came in. I wasn't a founder, didn't have my name on any patents, didn't get invited to ring the bell when we went public. What I did have was an uncanny ability to fix problems before anyone else noticed they existed. Vendor negotiations, mine. System integrations. I handled those at 3 a.m. while the C-suite slept. Employee conflicts that could have turned into lawsuits, I smoothed those over with a combination of empathy and strategic coffee runs. The irony is, they never gave me a proper title that reflected what I actually did. Director of Operations was a catch-all for Darla will handle it, budget reconciliations, compliance audits, keeping our biggest clients from jumping ship when our platform crashed again. Darla will handle it. I was the translator between our dev team's technical jargon and the board's demand for simple answers. I was the one who remembered birthdays, mediated territory wars between sales and marketing, and somehow made our shoestring budget stretch to cover enterprise-level demands. But the real power that came from my relationships with our vendors, while everyone else was focused on the sexy stuff, AI integration, market expansion, the next funding round I was building ironclad partnerships with the companies that actually kept our lights on. Chief among them was Synex Logics, our primary software vendor. They provided the entire backend for our patient management system, the secure servers for health records, the integration tools that made insurance billing possible. Without Synex Logics, TheraPoint was just a pretty PowerPoint deck. Here's what nobody knew. Back in 2017, Synex Logics was drowning. Bad management, worse timing, and a data breach that wasn't even their fault had driven them to the edge of bankruptcy. Their stock was worth pennies. Everyone was running for the exits, but I saw what others missed: solid tech. Good people, just terrible leadership. So I did something crazy. I liquidated my retirement accounts, sold my condo, borrowed against everything I had, and bought 51% of the company for less than what most people spend on a Tesla. I installed new management, kept my name off the public records through a holding company, and watched that investment multiply by a factor of 100. By 2023, Synex Logics was handling enterprise contracts worth hundreds of millions, their biggest client TheraPoint, naturally, an $80 million annual contract that I personally negotiated, signed, and managed. The beautiful irony. Every quarter, when TheraPoint's board reviewed vendor relationships, they'd nod approvingly at the excellent terms we had with Synex Logics. They had no idea they were complimenting me on negotiating with myself. I kept that information locked away, a secret card I never thought I'd need to play. In their reports and all-hands meetings, executives would talk about strategic partnerships and vendor synergy like they'd discovered fire. Meanwhile, I was in the trenches, handling 6 crisis calls when servers went down, mediating between our CTO's ego and Synex Logics' development team, making sure invoices were paid on time so our service wouldn't get interrupted. I was the only person who truly understood how dependent TheraPoint was on this single vendor relationship. It wasn't just about the software, it was about the custom modifications, the proprietary data formats, the 7 years of patches and workarounds that made our system unique. Switching vendors would take 18 months minimum and cost tens of millions we didn't have. But to TheraPoint's leadership, I was just the operations lady who handled the boring stuff, the one who stayed late to make sure everything worked while they went to cocktail parties to celebrate innovations they couldn't even explain. That was about to change. Everything changed when Colton Reeves walked through our doors. former venture capitalist turned transformation specialist. He came with a reputation for turning struggling companies into acquisition targets. The board brought him in as CEO after our growth plateaued, giving him carte blanche to reimagine TheraPoint for the future. He showed up on a Monday morning in January, wearing a $2,000 hoodie because nothing says, "I understand tech culture," like designer casual wear. His first all-hands meeting was a masterclass in saying nothing with maximum buzzwords. Synergistic disruption, paradigm-shifting pivots, blockchain-adjacent innovations. I started a mental bingo card. But Colton didn't come alone. He brought what he called his transformation team, though I preferred to think of them as his personal fan club. There was Marcus, the new CFO, who looked at our books like they personally offended him. Brad, the Chief Innovation Officer, a title that didn't exist until Colton created it, whose main innovations seemed to be scheduling meetings about meetings. And then there was Eva. Eva Winters, our new Chief Culture Evangelist. I'm not making that title up. She actually had business cards printed with that nonsense. Late 20s, MBA from Wharton, and an Instagram feed full of inspirational quotes overlaid on sunrise photos. She spoke exclusively in corporate wellness jargon and had the uncanny ability to make a simple yes or no question require a 45-minute alignment session. From day one, Eva decided I was everything wrong with TheraPoint's culture. Too practical, too focused on outdated metrics, like keeping the servers running and making sure people got paid. During her first culture workshop mandatory attendance, of course she pointed me out as an example of legacy thinking. Some of us, she said, making eye contact with me while addressing the room, are stuck in the old paradigm of thinking operations is about maintenance, but in the new TheraPoint, operations needs to be about innovation. We can't afford to have dinosaurs managing our transformation. Dinosaur? I'd been called worse, but never by someone who couldn't even explain what our company actually did. The erosion of my role started subtly. First, I was disinvited from the Monday leadership meetings Eva explained they were becoming vision sessions, and my presence might constrain the ideation process. Then Marcus started requiring detailed justifications for vendor payments I'd been approving for years. Brad scheduled his innovation meetings during my standing check-ins with the development team, forcing me to choose between strategic planning and keeping the lights on. Within 6 weeks, I'd gone from managing 12 direct reports to 3. My budget approval authority was cut from $5 million to $50,000. Decisions I'd been making for a decade suddenly required committee approval. Eva helpfully suggested I might be happier in a more focused role, perhaps something in vendor relations, as if I wasn't already managing our entire vendor ecosystem. The breaking point came during a board presentation about our transformation roadmap. I wasn't invited to present, naturally, but I watched the live stream from my office. Colton stood in front of slides I'd never seen, outlining a plan to modernize our vendor relationships by bringing more services in-house. We're too dependent on external partners, he declared, especially Synex Logics. $80 million a year for services we could build ourselves for half that cost. I nearly choked on my coffee. Build a parallel system for $40 million. They couldn't build a functioning expense report system for under $2 million, but the board ate it up, especially when Eva chimed in about owning our destiny and breaking free from legacy dependencies. What they didn't understand, what they hadn't bothered to ask me, was that our contract with Synex Logics wasn't just about software. It was about 7 years of customization, integration with 32 different insurance providers, compliance with healthcare regulations across 14 states, and a support team that knew our quirks better than we did. You can't replicate that institutional knowledge with a few bootcamp graduates and positive thinking. I tried to schedule time with Colton to explain the reality. His assistant cheerfully informed me that his calendar was fully committed to strategic initiatives for the next quarter. I tried Marcus, but he was deep in financial modeling. Brad was perpetually in innovation sprints. So I did what I'd always done. I kept things running. I smoothed over the panic from Synex Logics when they heard about the in-housing plan. I juggled the growing technical debt from Colton's quick wins that broke 2 things for everyone they fixed. I held my tongue when Eva scheduled a culture celebration the same day we had a major system upgrade, forcing my team to work until 3 a.m. while everyone else ate artisanal donuts. The writing wasn't just on the wall, it was in neon lights. They were managing me out. Death by 1,000 cuts. Every week brought new indignities, new restrictions, new examples of how uninnovative my approach was. Eva started copying Colton on emails questioning my decisions, always framed as opportunities for growth. I'd given 12 years to TheraPoint. I'd sacrificed weekends, relationships, my health to keep this company afloat. And now they were treating me like dead weight, an embarrassing reminder of our small company mindset. They had no idea what they were about to lose. The email came at 4:47 p.m. on a Friday. Quick sync needed. Conference room A, from Eva. Of course. She'd learned that firing people at the end of the week minimized cultural disruption. I saved the vendor reconciliation I was working on, closed my laptop, and walked to the conference room like I was heading to my own execution, which, professionally speaking, I was. Eva sat at the head of the table, wearing what I'd come to think of as her serious leadership face, pursed lips, furrowed brow, the expression of someone who'd practiced empathy in a mirror, but never quite mastered it. Next to her sat Derek from legal, nervously clicking his pen. The folder in front of them was laughably thin for someone who'd given 12 years to the company. "Darla," Eva began, her voice dripping with manufactured concern. "Thank you for joining us. I know this is unexpected." I sat down, said nothing. I'd learned long ago that silence makes people uncomfortable, and uncomfortable people reveal more than they intend. Eva shifted in her seat. "As you know, TheraPoint is undergoing a significant transformation. We've been evaluating all roles to ensure alignment with our new strategic direction." "You're firing me." Not a question. Let's skip the corporate theater. Derek winced. Eva's practiced expression flickered. "We're eliminating your position as part of a broader restructuring. This isn't about performance." "Of course not. It never is." "But about reimagining how operations functions in a modern tech company. We believe a flatter structure with embedded operational resources will better serve our needs." Embedded operational resources. They were going to distribute my responsibilities among people who didn't even know where to find the vendor contracts, let alone negotiate them. Derek slid the folder across the table. "Your severance package, 2 weeks' pay, continuation of health benefits through the end of the month, and..." I opened the folder and almost laughed. They'd gotten my name wrong. Darla Madison was typed neatly at the top. 12 years, and they couldn't even fire me correctly. Below that, my title was listed as Operations Manager, a position I'd been promoted from 8 years ago. "This is insulting," I pushed the folder back, "but not surprising." Eva leaned forward, switching to her coaching voice. "I understand this is difficult. Change is never easy, especially for those who've been comfortable in legacy roles. But I truly believe this will be an opportunity for you to explore new horizons, perhaps in a company better suited to your traditional approach." Traditional approach, like making sure the company actually functioned. "We'll need your laptop, badge, and parking pass," Derek added, sliding a plastic bag across the table. "It will forward any personal items from your office by courier." Today, I kept my voice steady. "You're giving me 15 minutes to clear out 12 years. We find it's easier this way," Eva said. "Less emotional burden on the team." The team, my team, who I'd hired, trained, and protected from exactly this kind of corporate brutality, they weren't even letting me say goodbye. I stood up slowly, placed my laptop on the table, unclipped my badge. The parking pass, a small plastic card that had gotten me through countless late nights and early mornings, joined the pile. Each item felt like shedding a piece of armor I'd worn for over a decade. "Is that everything?" Derek asked, eager to check off his boxes. I looked at Eva, then at Derek, then back to the severance folder with my misspelled name and incorrect title. All those years of invisible work, of problems solved before they became catastrophes, of relationships built and maintained reduced to a clerical error and 2 weeks' pay. "No," I said quietly. "That's not everything." They exchanged glances. "Good. Let them wonder." "You've just fired the person who approves every vendor payment over $50,000. The person who knows the authentication codes for our primary systems. The person who has the direct cell numbers for every critical support contact." I picked up my bag, slung it over my shoulder. "But more importantly, You've just fired the person who could make your entire $80 million vendor contract disappear in 72 hours. Eva's coaching smile faltered. Is that a threat? No, it's a timeline. Derek scrambled for his pen. We should document. Document what? That you fired someone without understanding their role. That you're restructuring operations without knowing how operations work. Please, document away. I headed for the door, paused with my hand on the handle. You might want to ask yourselves why Synex Logics only agrees to annual contracts, why they insist on that unusual termination clause in Section 6.3, why they've never pushed for a longer commitment despite the contract value. Darla, Derek's voice had climbed an octave. If you're suggesting you'd sabotage. I turned back, allowing myself a small smile. I would never. I'm just saying you should probably read the contracts you inherit, all of them, especially the signature pages. I walked out, leaving them with their thin folder and thick confusion. The security guard at the front desk, Paulo, who I'd helped get his daughter a PT internship, looked stricken when he saw me with the visitor badge. Ms. Monroe. It's okay, Paulo. Take care of yourself. Outside, the Denver afternoon was crisp and bright, the mountains visible in the distance. I sat in my car personal vehicle, thank God, not a company lease, and pulled out my phone, not to call anyone at TheraPoint. That bridge was ash. Instead, I opened a different contacts list, the one labeled Synex Logics Board. My board, the company I'd saved, rebuilt, and controlled, the company that held TheraPoint's digital life in its servers. The next 72 hours were going to be very educational for Colton Reeves and his transformation team. They wanted to reimagine TheraPoint's future. They should have imagined it without me in their past. I drove home in silence. No radio, no podcast, just the hum of tires on asphalt and the weight of what came next. My condo in Capitol Hill had never felt more like a sanctuary. I poured myself 2 fingers of bourbon, the good stuff I'd been saving for a special occasion, and opened my safe. Inside, past the passport and emergency cash, sat a manila folder labeled Contingency. I'd never thought I'd need it, like a fire extinguisher behind glass. It existed for the unthinkable scenario. Today, the unthinkable had arrived wearing a designer hoodie and spouting transformation rhetoric. The papers inside told a story. TheraPoint's leadership had never bothered to learn. Articles of incorporation for Monroe Holdings, LLC, established in Delaware in 2017. Stock certificates showing 51% ownership of Synex Logics Technologies. Board resolutions. Voting trust agreements. The paper trail of my $8 million gamble that had paid off beyond my wildest calculations. But the real power wasn't in the ownership, it was in the anonymity. I'd structured everything through layers of holdings, keeping my name off the public records, to the world. Synex Logics' majority shareholder was a faceless investment firm. Even my own board knew me only as D. Monroe, the mysterious investor who'd saved them from bankruptcy and insisted on quarterly calls but never attended in person. I opened my laptop and logged into the secure portal I used for board communications. 3 of the 5 board members were online, not surprising for a Friday evening. Tech executives never really stopped working. Emergency board meeting, I typed. Conference call in 1 hour. The responses came quickly. Jim Rawlings, the CEO I'd installed after the turnaround, was first. Everything okay, D? No, I replied, but it will be. I spent the next hour reviewing the contract between Synex Logics and TheraPoint. $80 million annually, paid quarterly, auto-renewing, but with some interesting provisions I'd insisted on back when I was negotiating with myself. The clause that mattered was buried on page 47, section 6.3. In the event of material changes to either party's operational leadership that could adversely impact the strategic partnership, either party may invoke a 72-hour review period, during which services may be temporarily suspended pending resolution. I'd written that clause thinking about protecting Synex Logics if TheraPoint ever got acquired. Never imagined I'd be using it to protect myself. At 8 p.m., sharp, I dialed into the board call. 5 voices greeted me, curious and concerned. Gentlemen, I began, I need to inform you of a material change in our relationship with our largest client. TheraPoint. Jim's voice was tight. They're 40% of our revenue. 42%, I corrected. And as of 1 hour ago, they terminated their director of operations, the person who manages our relationship, the person who approves our invoices, the person who knows their infrastructure better than their own CTO. Silence. Then Michael Torres, our CFO. That seems short-sighted. It gets worse. Their new leadership team has been making noise about bringing our services in-house. They think they can replicate 7 years of custom development for half our annual contract value. That's insane, someone muttered. That's Colton Reeves. Their new CEO is a venture capitalist playing with tech he doesn't understand. He's surrounded himself with people who think operations is just another word for overhead. Jim cleared his throat. D, I appreciate the intel, but I'm not sure this warrants an emergency. Jim, who signs TheraPoint's contracts. A pause. Their chief operations officer. They don't have one anymore. They fired their director of operations, the de facto signatory, without appointing a replacement. More importantly, they fired the person named in Section 6.3 as the designated relationship manager. That's me. Now I had their attention. You, Jim's voice pitched higher. You work for TheraPoint. Worked, until about 90 minutes ago. Jesus Christ. According to our contract, I continued, that constitutes a material change in operational leadership. We have grounds to invoke the review period. 72 hours of suspended service while we assess the impact on our strategic partnership. Suspend service. Michael was running numbers in his head. To our biggest client, the board would crucify us. The board answers to the majority shareholder, I reminded them. And the majority shareholder just got fired by a CEO who thinks our entire service offering is replaceable overhead. Silence stretched across the connection. They were smart enough to see where this was going. What do you need from us? Jim finally asked. A vote. Invoke Section 6.3. Send formal notice of temporary service suspension effective Monday morning 8 a.m. Mountain Time. Make it clear this is due to the absence of our designated relationship manager and our concerns about strategic alignment. They'll panic, someone said. Yes, they will. They could sue. They could try, but they'd have to do it while their entire operation is down, and their in-house counsel is trying to figure out why they can't access any of their contracts, which are all stored on our document management system. More silence, then Jim. You've thought this through. I've had 12 years to think it through. I just never thought I'd need to execute. All in favor. Jim called the vote. One by one, 4 ayes came through. The 5th, our outside director Harrison, hesitated. This feels like using a nuclear weapon to swat a fly. Harrison, I said evenly, they didn't just fire an employee. They fired the person who built half their operational infrastructure while simultaneously planning to steal the other half. This isn't revenge. It's a reminder of why you don't burn bridges while you're still standing on them. Aye, Harrison said quietly. Motion carries. Jim, I need that notice sent within the hour. Copy their CEO, CFO, and their chief culture evangelist. Yes, that's her real title. Make sure to cite the specific contract section and emphasize this is a protective measure for both parties. Both parties, Jim repeated dryly. Sure. One more thing. When they call, and they will call, nobody answers until Monday morning. Let them stew in their transformation weekend. We wrapped up the call with logistics. As I closed my laptop, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years, the intoxicating mixture of power and purpose. For over a decade, I'd been the person who prevented fires. Now, I was going to show them what happened when you removed the fire prevention system entirely. I poured another bourbon and pulled up TheraPoint's investor relations page. They were scheduled to announce their Series D funding next week. $80 million in growth capital predicated on their robust operational infrastructure and strategic vendor relationships. Monday was going to be educational. By Wednesday, it would be transformational, just not the kind Colton Reeves had in mind. At 11:37 p.m. on Friday night, Jim Rawlings hit send on the most carefully worded email of his career. I'd reviewed it 3 times, ensuring every word was legally bulletproof while maximizing psychological impact. From James Rawlings, CEO, Synex Logix Technologies. 2. Colton Reeves, CEO, TheraPoint Health Systems. CC. Marcus Williams, CFO, Eva Winters, Chief Culture Evangelist. Subject: Urgent Notice of Service Review Period. Per Contract Section 6.3. The body was a masterpiece of corporate passive aggression. Dear Mr. Reeves, this notice is to inform you that Synex Logix Technologies is invoking Section 6.3 of our Master Service Agreement, effective Monday at 8 a.m. Mountain Time. We have been informed of significant changes to TheraPoint's operational leadership, specifically the termination of your designated relationship manager, who has overseen our partnership since its inception. As per our contract, such material changes trigger a mandatory 72-hour review period, during which service delivery may be temporarily suspended to assess impact on our strategic alignment. Please note that during this review period, access to all Synex Logix-hosted systems will be temporarily suspended. This includes patient management, record storage, billing integration, and support services. No data will be deleted or damaged. This is purely a protective measure. Service will resume upon successful completion of our strategic review. We value our 7-year partnership with TheraPoint and look forward to resolving this matter promptly. Our executive team will be available for discussion beginning Monday morning. Best regards, James Rawlings, CEO, Synex Logix Technologies. We recommend alerting your technical teams to prepare offline contingency protocols. That postscript was my addition. Let them scramble to find contingency protocols that didn't exist because I'd never built them. Why would I? The system had never gone down for more than scheduled maintenance. The first call came at 11:51 p.m. Colton Reeves himself, which surprised me. I'd expected him to delegate panic to underlings. Jim forwarded me the voicemail. This is Colton Reeves. I just received your email and there seems to be some misunderstanding. Call me immediately at... The second call came at 12:03 a.m. from Marcus, the CFO. His message was less composed. What the hell do you mean, service suspension? We have 14,000 patients scheduled for Monday. This is clearly a breach of... By 12:15, Eva had left her contribution, her coaching voice cracking under stress. Hi, James. This is Eva Winters from TheraPoint. I think we may have some crossed wires about organizational changes. I'd love to schedule a quick alignment session to... I turned off my phone and went to bed. For the first time in months, I slept like the dead. Saturday morning brought a symphony of escalation. Jim kept me updated via secure message. 17 calls before 9 a.m., emails from their legal team citing bad faith and tortious interference. A particularly creative one from Eva suggesting this was all a miscommunication that could be resolved with radical candor and empathetic dialogue. But my favorite was from their CTO, Brian Hutchins, who I'd worked with for 5 years. His email, forwarded by Jim, was just 3 words: please call me. Brian knew. He understood what they'd done and what was coming. By Saturday afternoon, the panic had evolved into bargaining. Marcus sent a formal letter offering to expedite the transition of operational responsibilities and suggesting they could appoint an interim relationship manager by Monday morning. Too little, too late. Saturday evening, they found the nuclear option, or thought they did. A conference call request came through from Richardson and Associates, TheraPoint's white shoe law firm. Jim patched me in silently. Mr. Rawlings? The senior partner's voice was steel-wrapped in silk. I'm calling to inform you that any service interruption will be met with immediate legal action. We're prepared to seek an emergency injunction. On what grounds? Jim interrupted calmly. Breach of contract. For starters, your client has obligations, which we're fulfilling to the letter. Section 6.3 explicitly allows for service suspension during leadership transitions. Your client agreed to these terms. Your client negotiated these terms. That was the beautiful irony. I'd negotiated those terms on both sides of the table. The lawyer tried another approach. This is clearly retaliatory behavior based on personnel decisions that are entirely within TheraPoint's discretion. Counselor, Jim's voice hardened. Are you suggesting that protecting our strategic interests when our primary contact is terminated without notice is somehow improper? Should we continue providing mission-critical services without clear operational oversight? That sounds like a liability nightmare. The call ended with vague threats about exploring all options and severe consequences. Standard lawyers speak for, "We've got nothing but hope you'll blink first." Sunday arrived with a new strategy: public pressure. Someone at TheraPoint, probably Eva, given the language leaked to TechCrunch that there was a minor vendor dispute that might cause minimal service disruptions. They were trying to get ahead of the story. I smiled and sent Jim a link to the full contract, highlighting not just Section 6.3, but also Section 12.7, the confidentiality clause that TheraPoint had just violated by discussing our business publicly. Add that to the Monday talking points, I messaged. By Sunday evening, the calls had taken on a desperate quality. Colton himself left a voicemail that Jim played for me. "Look, I don't know what the confusion is here, but we need to resolve this professionally. Whatever the issue is with our organizational changes, I'm sure we can work it out. Please call me back. Please. Please." The magic word that might have mattered a week ago when I was trying to schedule time to explain why his transformation plan was idiotic. At 11:59 p.m. on Sunday night, I sat in my home office, watching the clock. In 8 hours and 1 minute, TheraPoint would learn what operational excellence actually meant. Not buzzwords or transformation initiatives or culture evangelism, just the simple, brutal fact that complex systems require competent people to run them. And they'd just fired the most competent person they had. Monday morning arrived like a hurricane hitting an unprepared coast. At 8 a.m., Mountain Time precisely, Synex Logix's systems went dark for TheraPoint, not gradually, not partially completely. Every login attempt met the same message: service temporarily suspended pending strategic review, reference contract section 6.3. My phone, still off, sat peacefully on my kitchen counter while I enjoyed coffee and watched the mountains. But I didn't need to hear the calls to know what was happening. I'd architected TheraPoint systems. I knew exactly how they'd fail. By 8:15, the help desk would be drowning, nurses unable to access patient records, doctors locked out of prescription systems, billing frozen solid, the scheduling system which I'd integrated so tightly with Synex Logix that it practically lived on their servers, showing nothing but error messages. Jim started sending me updates at 8:30. I'd given him permission to enjoy this. Their CTO just called, actually crying, said they have Joint Commission inspectors on site today. Jesus, I'd forgotten about the Joint Commission visit, the hospital accreditation team that could shut them down for compliance failures. They'd need to demonstrate electronic health record access, medication tracking, billing accuracy, all impossible without Synex Logix. "Tell Brian I'm truly sorry about the timing," I messaged back. And I was. Brian was collateral damage, a good engineer trapped in bad leadership. By 9 a.m., the media had noticed. Not just TechCrunch anymore. Local Denver news was reporting major technical failures at TheraPoint facilities. Patients were being turned away from non-emergency appointments. The phone system, also integrated with our platform, was routing calls into a digital void. At 9:47, Jim forwarded an email from Eva. "This is causing real harm to real people. Whatever point you're trying to make, you're hurting patients who need care. Is this really who you want to be?" The woman who'd called me a dinosaur was now appealing to my humanity. Rich. "Remind Miss Winters," I told Jim, that TheraPoint chose to terminate their operational leadership without transition planning. We're protecting both parties from potential system compromises due to unclear oversight, very much in line with modern transformation best practices. By 10:30, the board was involved. Not TheraPoint's board, mine. My phone started ringing with board members who'd been contacted by their counterparts, venture capitalists calling in favors, trying to find pressure points. I answered Harrison's call. "They're claiming this could kill people," he said without preamble. "Hospitals have offline procedures for emergencies. They ran for decades without electronic systems. They'll manage." "That's cold, D." "No, Harrison. Cold is firing someone with 12 years of institutional knowledge via a form letter with their name misspelled. This is consequence. The real chaos wasn't in the hospitals, it was in the executive suite. By noon, Jim reported that TheraPoint's stock price had dropped 12% in pre-market trading. Word was leaking. A minor vendor dispute had become a full operational meltdown. At 12:45, Marcus broke. His email, forwarded by Jim, was pure desperation. "Please, we'll pay whatever you want. Double the contract. Triple. Just turn the systems back on. We have patients suffering." But the masterstroke came at 1:15. A all-staff email from Colton Reeves, blind copied to Jim by someone inside TheraPoint who remembered who'd actually kept their jobs safe all these years. Team. As you may have noticed, we're experiencing technical difficulties with some of our systems. This is due to a contract dispute with a vendor who has chosen to weaponize their service against our patients. Rest assured, we're exploring immediate alternatives and expect resolution shortly. In the meantime, please follow offline protocols. This situation only reinforces why our transformation initiative is so critical. We must own our own destiny, not be held hostage by external parties. Stay strong. We are TheraPoint. At Colton. Weaponize, held hostage, own our destiny. He was spinning this as validation for the very strategy that had caused it. The man was either delusional or brilliant. Then came the detail that made me laugh out loud at 2 p.m. Eva sent an all-staff resilience workshop invitation for 3 p.m., turning crisis into opportunity, a mindfulness approach. While doctors were calculating dosages by hand and billing was processing claims on paper, Eva was scheduling meditation sessions. By 3 p.m., the inevitable happened. A local news crew, tipped off by someone, confronted Colton in the parking garage. "Mr. Reeves, can you comment on reports that TheraPoint fired a key employee who then shut down your systems? That's a complete mischaracterization. We're experiencing a vendor dispute that... But didn't you fire your director of operations on Friday? The person who managed these systems?" Colton's face on the evening news would be memorable. The transformation specialist transformed into a deer in headlights. At 4:20, Brian, the CTO, sent a message directly to my personal email, the one he'd saved from years of working together. "Darla, I know this is you. I know why you're doing it. They're in full panic mode. Colton's talking about trying to break into Synex Logix's data centers. I've explained that's not how cloud services work, but he's not listening. Please, tell me what it takes to end this." Finally, someone asking the right question. "It's not about what I want," I replied. "It's about what TheraPoint needs to learn. Check section 6.3 again. 72 hours. They've survived one day, 2 more to go." By 5 p.m., the California office had gone home, unable to work without systems. The Denver headquarters was a ghost town except for the C-suite, still scrambling for solutions that didn't exist. The last update of the day came from Jim at 7:43 p.m. Their head of IT just submitted his resignation, effective immediately. Guess he doesn't want to be blamed for not having contingencies. Smart man, rats, sinking ship, and all that. I turned my phone back on to find 137 missed calls. I deleted them all unheard. Tomorrow would bring new strategies, new desperation, new understanding of what operational excellence actually meant. But tonight, I opened a bottle of wine and toasted the empty air. To transformation, Ms. Winters. To owning your destiny, Mr. Reeves. Let's see how that's working out for you. Tuesday morning. I woke to news that TheraPoint's stock had dropped another 18% at market open. The financial press smelled blood. Healthcare tech darling faces operational crisis ran in the Wall Street Journal. Forbes went with when digital transformation goes dark. But the real entertainment started at 9 a.m. when Jim forwarded me something extraordinary, a formal letter from TheraPoint's board of directors to Synex Logix, signed by all 7 members, including 2 I'd once considered friends. Dear Synex Logix leadership, we write to express our grave concern about the ongoing service disruption. While we understand contractual disputes arise in business, the weaponization of critical healthcare infrastructure crosses ethical boundaries. We hereby request immediate restoration of services and good faith negotiations to resolve any outstanding issues. TheraPoint values its partnership with Synex Logix and is prepared to discuss enhanced terms. However, should this disruption continue, we will have no choice but to pursue all available legal remedies, including but not limited to claims of tortious interference, breach of covenant of good faith, and potential criminal charges related to endangerment of patients. We await your urgent response. Sincerely, the Board of Directors, TheraPoint Health Systems. Criminal charges. They were getting creative, also desperate. Jim's response, which I edited only slightly, was a masterwork of corporate aikido. Dear TheraPoint Board, we share your concerns about patient care, which is precisely why Section 6.3 exists in our agreement to ensure continuity of service during leadership transitions. The current review period was triggered by TheraPoint's termination of your designated relationship manager without notice or transition planning. This person oversaw critical security protocols, compliance requirements, and operational procedures affecting millions of patient records. We find it curious that your board was apparently unaware of this termination or its potential impact on strategic vendor relationships. This suggests a concerning lack of oversight regarding operational decisions that affect patient care. Synex Logics remains committed to partnership, but cannot compromise on security and compliance standards. The review period will conclude as scheduled, after which we look forward to discussing a path forward with appropriate operational leadership in place. Respectfully, James Rawlings, CEO, Synex Logics Technologies. By noon, the defections had begun. 3 senior engineers, the ones who actually understood how integrated Synex Logics was with everything, submitted resignations. They knew what was coming and wanted no part of the blame. At 1:30, I received an unexpected call from Patricia Morse, no relation TheraPoint's longest-serving board member and someone I'd always respected. Darla, she said without preamble, I know it's you. Jim Rawlings doesn't write emails with that level of operational detail. I said nothing. We didn't know, she continued, about the firing. Colton did it without board consultation, said it was routine restructuring. 12 years is routine. We're convening an emergency board session. Colton's position is being reviewed. Too late, Patricia. You gave him carte blanche. You let him surround himself with people who think PowerPoint is a strategy. You endorsed his transformation without understanding what you were transforming from. What do you want? Finally, someone asking directly. Check your email in 1 hour. I spent the next 45 minutes crafting the perfect corporate ransom note. Not for money, I had plenty. This was about something more valuable: recognition and consequences. At 2:30, every TheraPoint board member received the same message from D. Monroe, majority shareholder, Synex Logics Technologies. To all the board of directors. As the controlling shareholder of Synex Logics, I'm prepared to end the service review period under the following non-negotiable conditions. 1. Immediate termination of Colton Reeves as CEO. 2. Immediate termination of Eva Winters, whose transformation has transformed nothing but competence into chaos. 3. Public acknowledgement of the critical role operational leadership plays in healthcare technology. 4. Contract renegotiation at 3x current rate with 5-year commitment, paid annually in advance. 5. Penalty clause of 50 MAWAs if TheraPoint attempts to build in-house replacement within 10 years. These terms expire at 8 h.m. Wednesday. After that, Synex Logics will terminate the contract entirely per Section 12.2, requiring 180-day wind-down, during which you'll need to find alternative solutions. For reference, the next best vendor in this space typically requires 18 to 24 months for implementation. Your Series D funding expires in 6 months. The choice is yours. Choose wisely. D. Monroe. Peace. Ms. Winters might want to schedule a workshop on the mindfulness of reading contracts. The response was immediate and explosive. Colton called Jim directly, screaming about extortion, blackmail, and corporate terrorism. Jim, bless him, simply responded that all communications should go through legal channels and hung up. By 4 p.m., the news had leaked. TheraPoint CEO on hot seat as vendor demands leadership changes, hit Reuters. Someone, probably a board member covering their ass, had shared everything with the press. At 5:47, Patricia called again. The board is meeting now. Colton is resisting. Then you'll resist finding a new vendor for the next 2 years. Darla, he has a golden parachute. It'll cost us millions. How much is your Series D worth? How much is patient trust worth? How much is your IPO worth when you can't demonstrate operational stability? Silence. Then Eva really has to go too. Eva represents everything wrong with modern corporate culture. She prioritizes appearance over substance, jargon over competence. She called me a dinosaur. Turns out, dinosaurs built things to last. At 7:12 p.m., local news ran a segment featuring confused patients, frustrated doctors, and a particularly damning interview with a nurse who'd worked at TheraPoint for 15 years. We used to have someone who made sure everything worked. She knew every system, every process. Then these new people came in talking about transformation and synergy, and suddenly that person was gone. Now look at us. We can't even check a patient's blood type without paper files from storage. The court of public opinion had rendered its verdict. At 9:55 p.m., Jim forwarded me a scan of a board resolution. Unanimous vote. Colton Reeves terminated effective immediately. Eva Winters terminated with cause. A search committee formed for new operational leadership. They're asking if you'll consider coming back as COO, Jim added. I laughed until tears came. Come back to clean up their mess, to work under whatever empty suit they hired next. Tell them to check their email at midnight. One more message to craft. One final twist of the knife, at midnight precisely. I sent my final communication to TheraPoint's board. Congratulations on your decisive action. SignX Logics will restore services at 8 a.m. Wednesday, contingent upon receipt of signed termination confirmations for both executives. Regarding your COO offer, no. Regarding contract terms, non-negotiable as stated. Contract documents will arrive by 9 a.m. Wednesday, signed by close of business or service termination proceeds. A word of advice. Your next leadership hire should understand that operations isn't overhead, it's oxygen. Choose someone who knows the difference. This concludes our correspondence. D. Monroe. Wednesday morning arrived with almost anticlimactic quiet. At 8 a.m. sharp, SignX Logics restored full service. Across TheraPoint facilities, screens flickered back to life, systems hummed into action, and thousands of healthcare workers exhaled collectively. By 9:15, TheraPoint's legal team had signed the new contract, 3 times the original rate, 5-year commitment, $50 million penalty clause, paid in advance by wire transfer completed at 11:47 a.m. The financial press had a field day. TheraPoint pays premium for stability, ran the headline in TechCrunch. The Wall Street Journal went with, When Vendors Hold All the Cards, a cautionary tale. But my favorite coverage came from an unlikely source, a healthcare industry blog that actually understood what had happened. TheraPoint's crisis wasn't about technology or vendor management, it was about the catastrophic cost of devaluing operational expertise. When companies fire the people who actually know how things work in favor of those who merely know how things sound, collapse is inevitable. Colton Reeves, I learned later, tried to spin his termination as a mutual decision to pursue new opportunities. His LinkedIn post about learning from transformation challenges garnered exactly the mockery it deserved. Eva Winters rebranded herself as a crisis leadership consultant, which was either deeply ironic or brilliantly self-aware. TheraPoint's Series D funding closed 2 weeks late at a 30% reduced valuation. Their IPO, optimistically planned for Q3, quietly disappeared from all investor communications. As for me, I sat in my home office on Wednesday evening, watching the sun set over the Rockies. My phone, now permanently on, rang occasionally with headhunters, board members from other companies, journalists wanting the inside story. I ignored them all. Instead, I opened a new bottle of wine, a Chateau Margaux I'd been saving for something special, and poured 2 glasses, one for me, one for the empty chair across from my desk where I'd once planned TheraPoint's future. I raised my glass to the empty chair. To operational excellence, I said to the silence. To the invisible engines that keep the world running. To the people who do the work while others take the credit. The wine was extraordinary, worth every penny, worth the wait. On my desk, I'd framed 2 documents. The first, my original employment contract with TheraPoint, signed 12 years ago with such hope and dedication. The second, a printout of the wire transfer confirmation. $240 million for 5 years of service they could have had for $80 million if they'd only remembered who kept their lights on. But the real trophy wasn't the money or the vindication. It was the handwritten note that arrived by courier that afternoon, addressed to D. Monroe in shaky cursive. Ms. Monroe, I'm the nurse from the news interview. 22 years at TheraPoint. We all knew it was you the moment the systems went down. You were the only one who understood how it all connected. Thank you for reminding them that we matter. Ava Sarah Chen, RN. I tucked the note into my desk drawer, next to the Synex Logix ownership papers I'd never need to hide again. Tomorrow, there would be new challenges, new opportunities, perhaps even a company that deserved what I could build. But tonight, I sat in comfortable silence, savoring excellent wine and a simple truth. Never underestimate the person who knows where the bodies are buried in your codebase. They fired me on a Friday afternoon, thinking I'd disappear quietly into corporate obscurity. By Wednesday night, I disappeared all right into a $250 million contract and the satisfaction of a lesson well taught. Some transformations destroy, others reveal what was valuable all along. Guess which kind Colton Reeves managed? Thank you for listening to this story of corporate revenge and operational justice. I'm curious, where are you listening from? Drop a comment below and let me know what you thought about Darla's journey. Did she go too far? Or did TheraPoint get exactly what they deserved? Don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more stories of workplace drama and sweet revenge, and share your own experiences with being undervalued at work. Sometimes the best revenge isn't just success, it's showing them exactly what they lost.